A single red LED on the primary EM800 magnetic anchor's diagnostic panel pulsed once. A pause, then twice. It repeated the sequence. A stark, digital heartbeat in the roaring darkness. A fault code. F227. Aitan, the man whose operational file listed him as Amir, stared at the tiny OLED screen on his wrist-mounted tactical computer. The wind on the roof of the Danube Tower wasn't just weather. It was a physical opponent, a solid wall of shrieking pressure that sought to peel them from the slick, rain-dampened metal surface. 49 stories. 171 meters of vertical, empty air between their position and the glittering asphalt of the Wagramerstrasse. The manual for the EM800, which he had memorized, was brutally clear. F227 designated a microfracture in the ceramic insulation of the primary power conduit. Under the immense load required to hold 2 men against the building's facade, compounded by the lateral shearing force of the 60-knot wind gusts, that microfracture could cause a cascade failure, a power arc that would short the entire magnetic field in an instant. The anchor would simply let go. He had a 30-second window, narrowing with every gust of wind. The building's rooftop security patrol, 2 guards on a predictable 15-minute rotation, would round the central HVAC condenser unit in precisely 28 seconds. Their footsteps, logged and analyzed over 48 hours of relentless surveillance, were a metronomic beat he could feel through the soles of his boots. In his inner ear comms unit, Leah's voice was a crystalline transmission of pure data, stripped of all inflection or emotion. Amir, I have a ghost. New signal just powered on. UHF, 420 to 450 megahertz. Frequency hopping with a pseudo-random sequence I don't recognize. Short-range, high-power broadcast. It's professional-grade SIGINT gear, not building security. Source is the rooftop of the Melia building, 512 meters east-northeast. A second, independent fault code in the operational matrix. An unknown variable. Counter-surveillance. It could be the Austrians' BVT, their domestic intelligence service, running a sweep. It could be the Iranians' own Quds Force Overwatch team, a layer of security they hadn't anticipated. It could be a third party entirely, the Americans, the British, the Russians. In this city, it could be anyone. It didn't matter. The operational certainty of the last 72 hours had evaporated. They were no longer alone on the board. Nadav, clipped into his harness a meter to his left, didn't speak. He just glanced from the blinking LED on the anchor to Amir, his face an unreadable mask behind his ballistic goggles and wind gaiter. As the team's gear specialist and mechanical engineer, he knew what the F227 code signified with more intimacy than the manufacturer's own technicians. It was his job to trust the tech. And the tech was screaming a high-priority warning. Abort was the logical, 100 times out of 100 protocol choice. 2 independent mission-critical threats manifesting in the final seconds before insertion. Standard Kaidan operational doctrine demanded they pull back, melt away into the Vienna night, and re-evaluate the target. But the air-gapped server on the 48th floor was scheduled to receive, encrypt, and transmit the final purchase authorization for the centrifuge components in 1 hour and 47 minutes. This was their only window. The transaction was a one-time digital handshake. Miss it, and the components would ship from Germany within the week. The patrol was 20 seconds out. Amir processed the variables, his mind a cold, parallel processor. The probability of anchor failure. The manufacturer's stress tests on an undamaged unit put the failure rate at 1 in 100,000. The F227 flaw, according to Nadav's own pre-mission analysis, degraded that to a potential 1 in 20. A 5% chance of catastrophic failure. A risk, but a quantifiable one. The probability that the ghost signal had already identified them, unknown. A black box. Their thermal and RF signatures were minimal, but not zero. To stay was a gamble against both physics and an unseen enemy. To leave was certain strategic failure. The mission would be scrubbed. The components would arrive in Tehran. Iran's nuclear program would take a 2-year leap forward, bypassing a generation of enrichment technology. He keyed his throat mic, his voice a low, gravelly tone that the wind could not bury. Leah, jam it. Full spectrum white noise. Burn the channel. Nadav, we go. Now. The decision was made. The patrol's heavy footsteps grew louder, echoing off the metal ducting. Nadav, without a flicker of hesitation, unclipped the primary carbon fiber line from his belt and tossed the weighted end over the edge. It made no sound as it was swallowed by the abyss. The red light on the anchor kept blinking its 2-part warning. 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. The mission, codenamed Operation Glass Serpent, didn't begin in the Vienna wind. It began 6 months earlier, in a sensitive compartmented information facility, a sterile, soundproofed briefing room 3 levels beneath the streets of Tel Aviv, with a single, heavily corrupted data packet. The packet was the final, desperate transmission from a Mossad asset inside Iran's Ministry of Intelligence, a senior official codenamed Cassian. For 2 years, Cassian had been the crown jewel of the Samet Division's human intelligence network, a man cultivated, managed, and protected by his handler, a Katsa named Yael. Then, after sending his last emergency message through a prearranged, one-time dead-drop server, he went silent. The data was a digital ghost, a puzzle with 90% of its pieces missing. It contained partial architectural schematics for an office on the 48th floor of the Danube Tower in Vienna. The company name was listed as Cygnus Global Trading GmbH. It mentioned an air-gapped server, a weekly diplomatic pouch courier from Tehran, and a Tier 4 security system, independent of the building's central mainframe and reporting directly to a server in Iran. Then, the data stream ended mid-sentence. Cassian was gone. Presumed compromised. Presumed undergoing interrogation in Evin prison. Presumed dead. The mission was born from that failure, from that silence. The intelligence was an appetizer, not a meal. It told them where to look, but not what they would find, or how to get to it. The response from Mossad Command was swift and absolute. The file was flagged Aleph Gimel, requiring direct action. It was handed to the Caesarea department, and from there to its operational tip, the Kaidan unit. And Kaidan handed it to Amir. Amir's real name was Eitan Cohen. His service file was thin on personal details and thick with operational history, a redacted litany of black operations. A decade in Sayeret Matkal, the IDF's elite reconnaissance unit, specializing in deep cover intelligence gathering before being sheep-dipped, officially discharged from the military and scrubbed from its records, and transferred to the Mossad. His defining moment, the one that cemented his reputation, came in 2018. Operation Damask Rose. A high-value Syrian general, the scientific head of their chemical weapons program at the SSRC, wanted to defect with blueprints for a new binary nerve agent. The extraction plan was complex, involving a faked car accident and a midnight rendezvous on the Golan Heights border. But the plan went sideways. The general's 4-car security detail, spooked by a routine police checkpoint, changed their route at the last second. The Mossad team had 90 seconds to improvise a new intercept point on a crowded Damascus highway during evening rush hour, or the asset was lost forever. 7 other team leaders would have aborted. Amir didn't. Staring at a live drone feed, he saw a pattern in the chaos. a momentary gap created by a merging bus lane. He redirected the team's two vehicles, executing a perfect rolling box maneuver that isolated the general's Mercedes for less than 12 seconds. They pulled the general from his car and replaced him with a body double in full view of 100 witnesses who saw nothing more than a minor traffic incident. He got the asset and his data out. That preternatural ability to process incomplete data under impossible pressure and make a brutally decisive call was why he was now standing on a Vienna rooftop, gambling his life and the life of his men on a 5% chance. He wasn't a gambler. He was a master of calculating odds in real time and accepting the price of the wager. His eyes and ears on this mission belonged to Shira Levi, known as Leah. At 28, she was the youngest member of the unit, a prodigy poached from Unit 8200, the IDF's Signal Intelligence Corps. Her legend was forged in the silent, invisible war of code. In 2020, Hezbollah, with Iranian funding, had rolled out a new military-grade communication network in Beirut, secured with quantum key encryption that was, theoretically, unbreakable. For 6 months, it was a black hole for Israeli intelligence. Attacks were being planned, orders given, and 8200 heard only encrypted static. Leah, then a junior analyst, rejected the brute force computational approach of her superiors. She spent 3 weeks living on caffeine and military-issue protein bars, analyzing not the encryption itself, but the tiny junk data packets that regulated the network's internal timing synchronization. She found an anomaly, a rounding error in the time-stamping algorithm of the network's core routers. A flaw so microscopic, a matter of nanoseconds. It was considered irrelevant by the system's designers. She wrote a piece of elegant, malicious code that exploited that flaw, not to break the encryption, but to subtly manipulate the timestamps, tricking the network into thinking messages were arriving out of sync. This triggered an automated diagnostic and reset protocol, which for a window of 250 milliseconds, broadcast the session's encryption keys in an unencrypted state to resynchronize the nodes. She didn't break the door down. She found the key the engineers had accidentally left under the mat. The resulting flood of intelligence allowed the Israeli Air Force to preemptively destroy 3 Hezbollah command bunkers and a long-range missile convoy. For Glass Serpent, she wasn't just the comms link. She was the electronic warfare weapon, the ghost in the machine tasked with blinding the enemy. The muscle and mechanical genius of the team was Benzion Katz, or Nadav. A former Shayatet 13 naval commando, he viewed the world as a series of physical problems to be solved with applied physics and engineering. His specialty was unorthodox entry. In 2019, Mossad needed to verify intelligence about a new Syrian chemical weapons facility near Homs. They needed air samples from inside the main processing chamber to confirm the production of a new generation of sarin. The facility was a fortress. Armed guards, seismic sensors, pressure plates, motion sensors. But Nadav, studying high-resolution satellite imagery for weeks, found a potential design flaw. A 90-meter-tall exhaust ventilation shaft, 2 meters in diameter, that ran from the roof directly to the target chamber. It was lined with smooth, coated steel and deemed unclimbable by every analyst. Nadav disagreed. The memory was tactile, a phantom sensation of cold metal and the acrid taste of chemical residue at the back of his throat. Pitch blackness. The only sound was the hiss of his closed-circuit rebreather and the rhythmic thunk hiss of his custom-built pneumatic pitons. He was 60 meters down the shaft, his body a pendulum in the dark. Thunk. He fired the right-hand piton into the steel wall. The hardened spike bit with a satisfying crunch. Hiss. The CO2 cartridge vented. He tested the hold, putting his full weight on it. Solid. He retracted the left-hand piton, swung his body across the void, and repeated the motion. Below him, somewhere in the suffocating dark, was a crisscrossing web of laser tripwires. Leah's pre-mission analysis of the system schematics had been precise. 3 arrays, staggered. The first was a simple horizontal grid. The second, a diagonal lattice. The third was dynamic, its beams constantly shifting in a randomized pattern. He paused his descent, hanging from the 2 pitons, and pulled a small, articulated arm from his pack. At its end were 3 micro-mirrors. For 10 minutes, suspended over a lethal drop, he worked by feel and memory, patiently angling the mirrors to intercept the first laser beam and loop it back perfectly into its receiver. The circuit remained unbroken. To the system, he was invisible. He bypassed all 3 arrays in this manner. A silent, painstaking process that was more neurosurgery than climbing. He reached the bottom, collected the air samples in 3 vacuum-sealed canisters, and began the arduous 90-meter climb back up. The samples confirmed the presence of cyclosarin precursors. The facility was destroyed in an airstrike a week later. Nadav was a quiet, intense man who spoke the language of physics, material stress, and load-bearing capacity. For him, the Danube Tower was just another vertical problem set. Orchestrating the operation from the ground, the spider in the center of the web, was the Katza, Yael, Tamar Kaplan. She was the one who had run Cassian, and his loss was a professional wound that had not healed. She had spent the last 5 years building a network in Vienna, the old city of spies where every other diplomat and businessman was working for an intelligence service. Her covers were impeccable. An art dealer specializing in antiquities, a graduate student at the University of Vienna researching Habsburg history, a freelance journalist. She moved through the city's social strata with an invisible ease, recruiting sources, mapping out safe houses, and building the logistical scaffolding that made missions like this possible. Her cultivation of Cassian was a masterclass in human intelligence. It took 2 years. It began with a chance meeting at a university lecture on Rumi, progressed through shared interests in Persian poetry. They used specific couplets as confirmation codes in their communications, and solidified into a clandestine relationship built on trust and carefully laundered payments funneled through her art dealership. She was the mission's safety net and its memory. While the team on the tower focused on the physical infiltration, Yael was playing a dozen other games at once, monitoring Austrian police and emergency service frequencies, preparing multiple extraction routes, and running the 2-man team of Sayanim, local Jewish helpers who would plant the secondary relay device. Her role was less kinetic but more precarious. If she made a mistake, Amir, Leah, and Nadav wouldn't just fail. They would cease to exist. Disavowed by their own government, their names erased from every record. The geopolitical chessboard on which they operated was fracturing. The 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal was a dead letter. Iran, freed from its constraints and under immense economic pressure from sanctions, was engaged in a clandestine sprint for a nuclear weapon. Their strategy was twofold. At home, their scientists at the underground Fordow and Natanz facilities worked on enriching uranium with ever more advanced centrifuges. Abroad, a covert network run by Unit 190 of the Quds Force, the external operations arm of the IRGC, worked to procure the necessary technology from unsuspecting or complicit Western companies. They used a complex web of front companies, shell corporations, and middlemen to buy dual-use technology, items that had legitimate civilian applications but were also essential for a nuclear weapons program. Cygnus Global Trading was the latest and most dangerous of these fronts. An MI6 attempt to place a human asset inside their Vienna office a year prior had ended in disaster. The asset, a German financial analyst codenamed Magpie, had simply vanished 3 weeks into his employment. His body was never found. More recently, a CIA operation codenamed Vienna Waltz to bug a visiting Iranian trade delegation had been spectacularly compromised, leading to the public expulsion of 2 American diplomats and a tightening of surveillance by the Austrian BVT on all foreign nationals. Vienna was a hot zone, crowded and paranoid. Cygnus was not a soft target. It was a Quds Force operational fortress, disguised as a legitimate business. The urgency for Operation Glass Serpent crystallized when Unit 8200, using a backdoor Leah herself had planted years earlier, intercepted a series of encrypted communications between a known Unit 190 procurement agent in Tehran and a German engineering firm, Von Klaus Precision Works. The chatter was about a pending sale of high-stability atmospheric research gyroscopes and experimental carbon composite rotor tubes. To a layman, it sounded innocuous. To a Mossad nuclear analyst, it was a 5-alarm fire. The technical specifications matched, with 99.7% certainty, the components for Iran's new, highly advanced IR-6 and IR-9 gas centrifuges. These weren't the clumsy, inefficient P-1 machines of the past. The IR-9, using magnetic bearings and miraging steel rotors, could enrich uranium 50 times faster than the first-generation IR-1. Acquiring these components from Germany would slash Iran's breakout time, the time needed to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for a single bomb, from over a year to a matter of months. The transaction was being brokered through Cygnus Global Trading. The final sign-off, the digital transfer of funds and encrypted shipping authorizations, was to be executed on their secure, air-gapped server in Vienna. The date of the transaction was less than a week away. This wasn't just another intelligence-gathering mission. It was a preemptive strike. The goal was simple and brutal. Get inside that server, implant a hardware tap, steal the transaction data, and use it to identify and decapitate Iran's entire European procurement network. Physical access was the only option. The server was a digital island, unconnected to the outside world. To get to it, someone had to cross the moat. Someone had to scale the walls. The first 72 hours in Vienna were a study in meticulous, agonizing patience. The team, having entered Austria on forged Swiss passports as a team of telecommunications architects, established their operational base in a 4th-floor apartment Yael had secured months earlier in the Donaustadt district. The apartment's living room window offered a perfect, unobstructed line-of-sight view of the Danube Tower. It was their nest, their command center, their workshop. The floor was a controlled chaos of pelican cases. The air smelled of ozone, solder, and stale coffee. Leah established her workstation, a formidable array of laptops, signal analyzers, RF spectrum monitors, and custom-built Yagi antennas pointed at the target building. Nadav laid out his equipment on a sterile white tarp, checking every carabiner, every weave of the carbon fiber rope, every battery charge on the magnetic anchors. Amir stood by the window with a stabilized spotting scope, his eyes locked on the 48th floor, building a rhythm, a pattern of life, a human terrain map of their target. For 2 straight days, they did nothing but watch, listen, and record. They mapped the patrol routes of the building's security guards down to the second. They noted the exact time the cleaning crews entered and exited the 48th floor. They tracked the movements of every employee of Cygnus Global Trading, building profiles based on their arrivals, departures, and habits. Leah's work was the most abstract. Using a laser Doppler vibrometer, a device that shoots an invisible, eye-safe laser at a window, and measures the minute vibrations caused by sound waves inside the room. She attempted to reconstruct conversations. The triple-glazed, gas-filled security glass on the tower distorted the signal to near uselessness. But by running the data through a proprietary deconvolution algorithm, she was able to build a crude acoustic map, identifying the number of people in the office and their general locations. She couldn't hear words, but she could hear activity, and she confirmed the presence of at least 6 individuals in the office during business hours. The plan was a delicate, multi-layered construct. Its most critical and vulnerable point was not the rappel, but the relay. Leah's bug, codenamed Vesper, was a masterpiece of miniaturization. Smaller than a fingernail, it was a field-programmable gate array, FPGA, designed to be physically attached to the server's SATA data bus. It would draw power from the board and broadcast copied data in encrypted, millisecond-long bursts, hidden within the ambient RF noise of the city. But its signal was deliberately weak to avoid detection, with a range of no more than 500 meters. It couldn't reach the main listening post. This necessitated the relay, a signal booster that had to be planted in the adjacent Ari's tower, in a law firm on the 47th floor that had a direct line of sight to the target window. This task fell to Yael's Psionim team, David and Jonah, 2 Israeli expatriates who ran a small IT consulting business in Vienna. Their mission, on the afternoon before the main assault, almost scuttled the entire operation. Posing as network technicians, David and Jonah entered the law firm of Schmidt & Bach. Their cover was a scheduled upgrade to the firm's Ethernet cabling. The relay device was concealed inside a standard-issue AC power adapter. The plan was to swap it for the adapter powering a network switch in a small server closet. 20 minutes, in and out. But they encountered a complication. The firm's regular evening cleaner was sick. Her replacement was an older woman, obsessively thorough, who decided the server closet was overdue for a deep cleaning. She was there, on her hands and knees, scrubbing the baseboards, blocking their access. Yael, monitoring the situation from a cafe across the street, felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Every minute they were delayed increased their exposure. David, the older of the 2 Psionim, tried to gently ask the cleaner to come back later. She refused, citing her instructions. Jonah, meanwhile, noticed something worse. A new Wi-Fi access point had been installed in the hallway, one not on the firm's official blueprints. Leah, patched into their comms from the safe house, ran a quick scan. It was a rogue device, broadcasting a hidden SSID. It could be corporate espionage. It could be the BVT. It could be nothing. But it was another unknown variable. The window of opportunity was closing. Yael made the call. Abort the primary plan. Go to contingency. David, a former combat medic, walked calmly to the water cooler, filled a cup, and tripped, spilling the ice-cold water all over the floor near the cleaner. As she reacted with alarm, Jonah, moving with practiced speed, ducked into the office of a junior partner, knelt behind the desk, and swapped the power adapter for the man's desktop computer. It was a less ideal position, with a slightly more obstructed signal path. But it was done. They were out of the building 90 seconds later, their heart rates only returning to normal once they were several blocks away. Leah ran a diagnostic. The signal path was viable, but degraded by 15%. It would have to do. The first link in the chain was in place, but it was weaker than they had planned. As night fell, the mission shifted to Amir and Nadav. The F-227 fault and the ghost signal on the roof had forced Amir's hand, turning a calculated risk into a blind leap of faith. Over the edge they went, into the violent, shrieking wind. The descent was a brutal fight against physics. The wind didn't just push them. It slammed them against the building's glass face, then tried to rip them away. Every muscle in their bodies was tensed, absorbing the shocks. 48 floors. 47. 46. The city below was a silent, beautiful abstraction. A circuit board of light. Power fluctuation on Anchor 1. Nadav's voice was tight in the comms, strained with physical effort. The F-227 is drawing intermittent spikes. Battery life estimate is dropping. We're now at 73 minutes. They were supposed to have a 4-hour window. The flaw had cut it by more than half. Leah, can you run a remote diagnostic? Amir grunted, kicking off the glass to avoid a collision with a concrete mullion. Negative. Leah's voice came back, a frustrating wall of calm. The Anchor's firmware locks out remote access during active load bearing for safety. It's a closed loop. But I'm cross-referencing the power draw telemetry with the schematics. The fault is in the primary voltage regulator. It's creating a feedback loop every time the wind shear exceeds 50 knots. It's dumping power to compensate for a phantom load. Can we fix it? Nadav asked. There might be a manual override, Leah said, the sound of frantic typing audible under her voice. Access the control panel on your wrist unit. Go to the engineering submenu. Password is KFIR79er. Nadav, hanging from a rope 150 meters in the air, buffeted by gale force winds, began tapping on his tiny screen. I'm in. Find the power distribution matrix. You should see a schematic of the power conduits. There's a secondary bus, B7, that bypasses the main regulator. It's meant for bench testing only. It's not shielded for this kind of EM interference, but it should give you a clean power feed. You need to physically reroute the primary magnetic coil's power feed to it. That will create a power gap, Nadav stated flatly. For how long? If your timing is perfect, 100 milliseconds, Leah replied. The residual magnetism in the coils should hold, but it will be a significant drop in clinging force, maybe 40%. Do it on a lull, Amir commanded. He watched the building, the sky, feeling the rhythm of the storm. The wind howled, then momentarily dipped. Now, Nadav, now! Nadav's finger tapped the final command on his screen. For a fraction of a second, Amir felt a terrifying lightness, a sickening slip as the 800-kilogram grip of the anchor faltered. The anchor slid 6 centimeters down the steel beam, hidden within the wall, an agonizing screech of metal protesting through the building's frame. Then, the power rerouted. The magnetic field snapped back to full strength with a jolt that vibrated down the carbon fiber line. Status? Amir demanded. Override is holding, Nadav said, his breathing heavy. Power draw is stable. Battery life estimate is back to 3 hours, 20 minutes. They had bought themselves time, but the close call was a fresh reminder of how close to the edge they were operating. They continued their descent. 30 floors, 20, 10. Finally, they stopped, level with the dark, empty windows of the 48th floor. The Cygnus Global Trading Office. They anchored themselves to the facade with secondary suction cup pitons. Nadav unslung a flat black case from his back. Inside was a circular glass cutter, a high-frequency sonic device that didn't cut glass but vibrated it at its resonant frequency until a perfect circle of molecules simply decohered, allowing the pain to be lifted out without a sound. But first, the sensors. Leah, I'm seeing a magnetic contact sensor on the window frame and what looks like a passive infrared motion detector on the ceiling inside. Amir whispered, peering through a fiber optic scope. The contact sensor is a simple closed circuit. We can bypass it, Leah said. I'm pushing a looping signal to its wireless frequency now. To the system, the window is still closed. The PIR is trickier. It detects body heat. Nadav, your nitrogen wand. Nadav produced a thin silver canister with a long nozzle. He aimed a supercooled jet of liquid nitrogen at the inside of the window, directly in front of the PIR sensor. A patch of condensation instantly bloomed on the glass, then froze, dropping the surface temperature to well below zero. This created a cold curtain that would effectively blind the motion detector for several minutes. "Curtain is up," Nadav confirmed. "Cutting now." He placed the sonic cutter on the glass. A low hum, barely audible above the wind, filled the air. 30 seconds later, he lifted a perfect 1-meter circle of glass from the window and secured it to the side with suction clamps. The way was open. Amir slipped through the opening first, a shadow detaching from the night, his suppressed pistol leading the way. He moved with the fluid,